Hi, my name is Dong Song. I'm a professor in computer science at UC Berkeley. Welcome to the class on decentralized finance. This class is co-taught with four other co-instructors: Dan from Stanford, Arthur from Imperial College London, Andrew from UIUC, and Christine also from UC Berkeley. DeFi is an exciting new area. The world is changing fast, and the area of DeFi is changing even faster. We hope together you will enjoy the learning journey of DeFi in this class. Before we talk about DeFi, first let's talk about what is finance. Finance is a broad term. Anything that involves the creation, management, and investment of money and financial assets is essentially part of finance. And there are many different types of financial assets and financial instruments. For example, bank deposits, stocks, bonds, loans, derivatives, and so on. A financial asset essentially is a non-physical asset whose value is derived from a contractual claim. And there are many different types of financial services that we use on a daily basis. For example, banking, lending, borrowing, insurance, funds, and so on. And a financial market is a marketplace for trading financial assets. And first, let's look at how traditionally finance is done. Traditionally, we have centralized financial institutions that provide these financial services to us. There are different types of financial institutions depending on the type of financial services that they provide, such as banks, securities companies, fund management companies, and so on. And for more details, you can see Title 33 of the United States Code. There are a number of characteristics for these financial institutions. First, typically the financial institutions hold custodies of customers' funds and assets. For example, my money in my bank account, essentially my bank holds custody for them. And the bank has the power to freeze someone's accounts if there's illicit activities, for example. And also these financial institutions, they serve as intermediaries for transactions. For example, if I want to transfer money from my bank account to Dan's bank account, if we use the same bank, then the bank will decrease the balance of my account and increase Dan's account, and essentially serve as the intermediary for the transaction. And if Dan uses a different bank, then my bank will communicate with Dan's bank and perform the transaction. As intermediaries, these financial institutions has a lot of power. For example, they can censor the transactions. For example, if the money transfer is a type of money laundering, then the bank may censor the transaction. And also, these financial institutions take fees as for providing the financial service. And these financial institutions typically are highly regulated. They need to adhere to strict onboarding and continuous compliance rules. And there are different types of rules and regulations. For example, KYC, Know Your Customer, AML, anti-money laundering, and CFT, combat the financing of terrorism. As you can see here, as a consequence of how these financial services are provided, the customers usually have no privacy to the service providers. So for example, my bank knows my real identity and also knows the full account transaction information for my account. But however, to the customers, the financial services are very opaque, and the information and records are kept in siloed databases and applications. And as a consequence of how financial institutions operate, again, as holding custodies of customers' funds and serve as intermediaries for transactions. They essentially need to be fully trusted to operate correctly and securely. So we place a lot of trust on these financial institutions. On November 1st, 2008, the famous and anonymous Satoshi Nakamoto released his Bitcoin white paper. And this ushered the world into a new era for public blockchains. Public blockchains, also called distributed ledgers, they are a new type of technology that enables mutually distrusted nodes to come together and collectively maintain an immutable ledger that's open to anyone and that maintains immutable records and transactions. With the birth of Bitcoin, it provided for the first time the capability for users to provide self-custody of money, in particular digital currency. In 2014, Ethereum has been proposed as a next-generation blockchain platform, in particular, a smart contract platform with Turing-complete smart contract language. And with Ethereum, it allows different types of applications to run on top of the smart contract platform, and hence provide the capabilities for the first time for open programmable money and financial assets. And this essentially enabled a new way of doing financial services called decentralized finance. So what is decentralized finance? Essentially, this is a new type of financial infrastructure as an open, permissionless, and highly interoperable protocol stack built on top of the public smart contract platforms. And to determine whether a financial application is decentralized, is part of DeFi, we can go through a three-step determination process, and in particular, looking at three different aspects of the degree of decentralization for the financial application. So first, we look at custody and settlement, whether users have full control of their financial assets in this case, whether they take custody of their financial assets. If not, then that's clearly a DeFi application. And if yes, we go to the next step, looking at the transaction execution. Can someone single-handedly censor a transaction execution? If yes, then this means that the application uses DeFi settlement, but it has a CeFi intermediary. And then the next step we look at is, can someone single-handedly censor the protocol execution or change the protocol? And if yes, that means this is essentially governed DeFi. And if no, this means this is a fully decentralized finance application, DeFi. So why do we talk about DeFi, decentralized finance? So first, let's look at a comparison of the different characteristics between CeFi and DeFi, centralized finance versus decentralized finance. So in traditional centralized finance, it's a permission system. The financial systems are typically closed source and built on top of centralized siloed databases. And one needs approval and agreement for a third party to use these financial services and build on top. And these traditional finance custodial assets are usually custodied by these traditional financial services. and the traditional financial services are built on top of centralized trust and governance, where the financial service is responsible for making upgrade decisions and has admin privileges. And also, to use these financial services, one need to provide a real identity, for example, for KYC and AML compliance reasons. In contrast, decentralized finance DeFi applications and services are permissionless. They are typically built as open source systems on top of permissionless blockchains. And anyone can use and build on top of these financial services and interoperate with them without needing any third-party approval or agreement. And the financial assets are non-custodial in DeFi, where they are controlled and custodied by individual users. And DeFi applications and services are built on top of decentralized trust and governance. And they don't require, so they don't have any single entity that's responsible for upgrade decisions or having admin privileges, and are also called trustless. And for DeFi applications, users are pseudonymous and often do not provide their real identities. Given its characteristics, DeFi application services provide a number of advantages over traditional finance. One, they can be more efficient by removing the rent-seeking intermediaries. And DeFi enables open finance and universal accessibility, where anyone can use the financial services. DeFi also provides unparalleled transparency and public verifiability. Anyone can inspect the smart contract code and verify its execution and the state of the system, and hence verify the execution of the financial services. DeFi also enables self-custody and hence is censorship resistant, where the users custody their own financial assets. And their financial assets, in this case, cannot be frozen or taken away. DeFi also enables automation and programmability by as being built using smart contracts on permissionless blockchains. And with its openness, DeFi also enables unprecedented composability and interoperability. Different DeFi protocols and applications are often considered as Lego building blocks that one can stack up together to build new financial applications. And DeFi is a great playground for fast innovation. DeFi applications often are much simpler and faster to develop than the CeFi counterparts, and also enables new capabilities such as atomic composabilities that can enable new powers and applications that do not exist in the CeFi world. Given its advantages, DeFi has been growing rapidly. By a metric called TVL, total value locked, which measures the total value of financial assets deposited and locked in different DeFi applications, we have seen a tremendous growth of the usage of DeFi applications, where the TVL has gone over $80 billion. And also, we see a rapid growth of the total DeFi users over time as well, where we see over 3 million users have been using DeFi applications. So how is DeFi done? What is the DeFi stack? So DeFi is built on top of a decentralized smart contract platform. And within the DeFi ecosystem, there are different roles. So first, users use the DeFi application and services, and the DeFi service is often implemented as a smart contract. And in particular, for a DeFi application, there are a number of layers. So first, at the bottom is the settlement layer. For example, transactions are committed on the blockchain, which keeps an immutable log of the transactions. On top of the blockchain, there's the asset layer, which implements the different financial assets. There are different types of financial assets. One is the native protocol asset. For example, on Ethereum is ETH. There are also other types of financial assets that are implemented as smart contracts. For example, the ERC20 standard specifies a type of financial asset called fungible tokens. This, for example, a smart contract implementing ERC20 can maintain the balance of different accounts for this financial asset. Another example is the ERC 721, which specifies standards for non-fungible tokens, NFTs. On top of the asset layer is the protocol layer, where different types of financial services are implemented. This includes, for example, decentralized exchanges, decentralized lending, on-chain asset management, and derivatives, and so on. These protocols are implemented as smart contracts and get executed on the smart contract platform. And on top of this layer is the application layer, which is user-facing, that users can use to interact with the underlying protocol layer. And on top of the application layer is the aggregation layer, which can aggregate different applications into one user-facing application. For example, as a wallet that user uses that can help user to utilize different types of financial DeFi applications and protocols. In addition to the users and DeFi protocols, the DeFi applications and also the blockchain also need to interact with the outside world. So for example, for a blockchain is essentially a distributed database with atomic settlement. It may need to interact with another blockchain, which may have other types of financial assets on this other blockchain. And this is usually done using a bridge connecting the two different blockchains. And also, the DeFi applications on top of the blockchain may need information from outside world that's off-chain. For example, it may need pricing information from centralized exchanges, or even, for example, may need information from about the weather and so on. So an Oracle essentially helps provide such information that brings information outside of the blockchain onto the blockchain. And also there's another type of entity that we call keeper. Essentially is a type of bots that will send trigger events to the blockchain. So for example, certain DeFi applications on the blockchain, as you will learn in the later part of the class, for example, there may be collateral in DeFi application that may need to get liquidated during when certain events happens. For example, when token price drops and so on. Such liquidation can be performed by outside entities that we call keeper here that actually send such requests or transactions to the DeFi applications on the blockchain, which essentially helps the DeFi application to operate. And of course, in this case, the DeFi application is designed with the right incentives so that it will incentivize external entities such as keepers to send such transactions and triggers to the DeFi application to make sure that the application properly runs. And in this case, we can see that we have the DeFi world and the CeFi world essentially can run side to side in parallel. And there can be connections between the two. For example, as we already discussed, Oracle can help bring information in CeFi into the DeFi world. And on the other hand, on DeFi, certain assets may be reserves of packed assets, and such reserve may be kept in the CeFi world. And hence, the CeFi and DeFi world has a lot of connections between them. There are different types of DeFi services that have already been built. Essentially, any service that you can think of in CeFi, its counterpart in DeFi exists. For example, there are DeFi services for exchanges and trading, lending, insurance, asset management, and so on. So now let's look at a few examples of these DeFi building blocks and services. The first we are going to look at is asset tokenization, which is the core of DeFi, how DeFi assets are created. Tokenization is essentially the process of adding new assets to a blockchain. And in blockchain, token is the key, where token is the blockchain representation of the asset. And this token representation makes assets more accessible, easy to transfer, and programmable. And there are different types of tokens. For example, governance tokens, where the token holders of the governance token can vote and to decide the future development and important decisions on the protocol. And there can be security tokens, which, for example, represent tokenized physical assets, such as tokenized real estate. And another type of token asset is non-fungible tokens, called NFTs. And many of you may have heard about the recent craze on NFTs. So NFTs, these are non-fungible tokens that can represent different types of assets, such as music, arts, and so on. In fall 2017, CryptoKitties were created as a game, which is the first explosion of NFTs, where these CryptoKitties are traded for high prices. And more recently, in March this year, artist Beeple's Everyday's NFT was sold for over $69 million. So NFT has become a new way for arts and for representing art ownership and for trading of arts. Another important type of tokens, especially for DeFi services, is called stablecoins. So as you may notice that a lot of the tokens and the tradable tokens, their price can be very volatile. But for a lot of the DeFi applications, it needs a type of asset with a stable price, and hence motivates the creation of a type of token called stablecoin. So these stablecoins essentially are tokens whose price is pegged to certain other types of assets, such as fiat and precious metal and so on. And there are different ways for creating stablecoins. For example, there can be stablecoin can be created using off-chain collateral, such as off-chain fiat or precious metal. It can also be created using on-chain collateral, essentially using collateral of on-chain crypto assets. Or they can be non-collateral and are purely created using algorithmic methods. And this is a real invention in DeFi that does not exist in the CeFi world. And in the later part of the class, we are going to study in more detail the different types of stablecoins and study their stability or instability and what are good ways for creating stablecoins. Another example of DeFi building blocks and services is decentralized exchanges. So exchanges is a marketplace that allows users to trade different financial assets. And traditionally, this has been done with a centralized exchange. Like any other centralized financial services, a centralized exchange holds custody of users' assets. And there has been many attacks on centralized crypto exchanges. The most famous one is the attack on Mt. Gox in 2014, where over 800,000 bitcoins were stolen. And this was valued over 450 million at the time. And today it would be valued over $30 billion. And in year 2019 alone, over 12 centralized exchanges have been attacked with over 300 million worth of crypto stolen. And also there can be rogue centralized exchanges, which simply takes users' money away and then disappears. So with these centralized exchanges, also there's a lot of non-transparency that users do not know how decentralized exchanges operate. In contrast, decentralized exchanges provides a number of advantages. One is non-custodial. Users take custody of their assets. And two, these decentralized exchanges provide full transparency on how the transactions and trades have happened. Centralized exchanges often determines the trade using an order book, where sellers and buyers put up their orders that get matched on the centralized exchange and then get settled. Whereas in decentralized exchange, there has been a number of innovations that allows different types of order matching to facilitate the trade. For example, there's standard order book methods, but also there's a new type of method called constant function market maker, which does not need an order book. That is also called AMM, automated market maker, which we will learn more in later part of the class. And also there are other methods such as reserve aggregator and so on. The biggest decentralized exchange so far is Uniswap. And over time, we have seen that the trading volume on decentralized exchange has grown drastically over time. And in fall 2020, it was the first time when Uniswap's trading volume exceeded the centralized exchange Coinbase trading volume. As we can, this is a great example that even though decentralized exchange such as Uniswap is built with a much smaller team, but however, it can be very powerful, and with the trading volume exceeds centralized exchange such as Coinbase, which is now a publicly listed company with billions of dollars of market cap. The third example of DeFi building block and service that we will see here is decentralized lending. Lending is an important function in finance, where people who have money lends money to people who need money. And an important part of lending is to make sure that the loaned money eventually gets returned. And when the loan money fails to be returned, this is called a default. In centralized finance, CeFi, it tries to reduce the rate of default because processing default is very expensive. And in case of even when it's fully collateralized, and when it's under collateralized, of course, the default rate is even more expensive. And hence, for lending in DeFi, it relies on evaluating the credits for the borrower. In DeFi, the lending is largely done in different ways as collateralized loans, in particular with over-collateralization. And also because in DeFi, oftentimes entities are pseudonymous and there's no real identity and there's no real credit, and hence the lending in DeFi is often not based on credit. And there are different types of collateralized loans, including collateralized debt positions. So essentially, borrowers put up collaterals and use the collateral to create new tokens, for example, in MakerDAO's case. Another example is collateralized debt markets, where borrowers put up collaterals and then borrow funds from lenders as other types of crypto assets. And a popular type of collateral debt markets uses pooled funds, such as in Compound and Ally. And there's new DeFi services that's exploring the lending in under collateralization case as well. Another really fascinating invention in DeFi is called flash loans. So blockchain, unlike the CeFi case, has a new capability that ensures atomicity in transactions. In particular, what this means is that the actions within a transaction are executed entirely in sequence or fail collectively. So with this type of atomic transaction capability, blockchains can enable very interesting new capabilities, such as flash loans. So in the flash loans case, a lending service could provide loans without any collateral, but within one transaction, under the condition that the provided loan are paid back by the end of the transaction, plus interest on the lent amounts. Because of the atomicity for transactions, this flash loan can be done in a very secure way. Because if the borrower at the end of the transactions cannot return the loan plus the interest, then the transaction will fail and the state will revert back, just as if the borrower has never borrowed the loan. And the amazing part for this is that this means that without any resource, without any collaterals, anyone can borrow in with this flash loan that actually could be very high amounts, can be millions or even billions of dollars without any upfront costs. And this does not exist in DeFi at all. So here is an example flowchart of the flash loan. The borrower, within one transaction, the borrower first take out the flash loan from a loan service, and then it uses the borrowed money to go wild. For example, it could use the borrowed money for arbitrage and so on. And then at the end, repay the loan with interest. So here is a concrete example where the arbitrager borrows a flash loan and then use this loaned amount on the exchange to exchange. For example, it borrows this much USDC and then exchanges this USDC to DAI given the current price of USDC and DAI on this market. And then on another market, it exchanges the DAI into the USDC given that there's a difference between the price of on the two markets, and essentially just performed arbitrage. And this arbitrage generated a profit, so that at the end of the transaction, the arbitrage can return the original flash loan and then keep the remaining as the profit. So these are just a few examples for DeFi building blocks and services. And there are many other examples as well. For example, decentralized derivatives. Derivatives are essentially financial assets whose value is derived from certain underlying assets. And there are different types of derivatives. For example, asset-based derivatives, such as synthetics and mirror, that creates derivatives based on, for example, stocks. And there can be event-based derivatives, such as Augur or prediction. These are essentially prediction markets that creates assets based on external events. Another type of DeFi building block and service is on-chain asset management. So these essentially provides asset management to help users to manage different DeFi assets. However, the interesting thing for this asset management is that it's done on-chain as smart contracts, different from traditional asset management. And hence, these are non-custodial, and they can do a lot of different things. They can perform semi-automatic rebalancing of portfolio, or even perform, for example, trend trading. And there are a number of examples of these on-chain asset management, such as Yearn and SAP Protocol. And another interesting example is decentralized insurance done on-chain as well. And in the rest of the semester, we are going to take deeper dives for these different types of DeFi building blocks and services. DeFi provides great innovation and many opportunities, but at the same time, there are also many risks in DeFi that we need to be aware. So first, let's talk about DeFi security. Given that DeFi runs on a number of layers, essentially there are security issues on all layers. For example, including network layer attacks, consensus layer attacks, and smart contracts can have bugs and vulnerabilities. And when we compose DeFi protocols, there can be composability attacks. And as DeFi gets information and communicates from the outside world, there can be breach attacks, oracle attacks, and given that DeFi is governed in a decentralized fashion, there can be governance attacks as well. And DeFi security is a huge risk in DeFi. In So far in year 2021, DeFi attacks when we talk about DeFi security, essentially there are two different types of security issues that we need to consider. One we call technical structure security or technical security. So these are essentially security issues risen from the underlying technical vulnerabilities and in the technical structure of the blockchain systems. And often attackers can take the profit in a risk-free manner by exploiting these technical vulnerabilities. And another type of DeFi security issue is what we call economic incentive security or economic security. And in these type of security issues, attackers exploit the incentive structure of the protocol to realize unintended profit at the expense of the protocol or its users. In the rest of the semester, in the rest of the class, we will study the details of the different types of DeFi security issues. For example, looking at different types of smart contract vulnerabilities that can be exploited for attacks, as well as the economic security issues. So here is a simple example of a DeFi attack called front-running attack. In this case, an adversary observes a transaction on the blockchain peer-to-peer network. And for example, this is a profitable trade that a user would like to do to make some money. However, given that all the transactions are open in clear text on the peer-to-peer network, so attackers could see these transactions before they are committed. So in this case, instead of having the user taking the profitable trade, the attacker then decides to create a transaction that actually front runs the user's trade so that the attacker gets to take the profit. And the attacker can do this by paying a higher transaction fee. And given that in a blockchain, for example, Ethereum, the miners mine transactions based on their paid fees. And hence, in this case, the miner will execute the attacker's transaction before the user's transaction, and hence front run the user's transaction and enable the attacker to be able to take the profit. And similar techniques can also be used for backrunning a transaction in what's called a sandwich attacks. And in later part of the class, you will learn more about different types of such attacks. And these different types of attacks also allows miners to essentially be able to extract more value from the blockchain other than just mining for block rewards. They could perform these different attacks or facilitate attackers to perform different types of attacks. And we call these miner extractable value or blockchain extractable value, where the miners and the attackers can, in this case, extract values from the different DeFi applications or other blockchain smart contract applications to extract value from the ecosystem. And we'll also study more about these MEVs and seeing that these MEVs have been has become a tremendous amount of value, ranging in hundreds of millions of dollars. Another types of risks in DeFi that we need to consider is systemic risks. On one hand, for DeFi, the composability enables great innovation and fast progress in developing new DeFi applications. On the other hand, this type of composability also introduces wide dependencies in DeFi applications. Thus, issues in one DeFi application can quickly cause issues in other DeFi applications as a ripple effect. So for example, in the recent past, there has been significant price declines, huge drops on on a single day in cryptocurrencies. And then in this case, given crypto assets are used as collaterals in many different DeFi applications, such a huge price drop can easily cause huge ripple effects, causing liquidations, deleveraging, and so on in different DeFi applications, to the extent that could destabilize the different DeFi applications and services and causing the price to fall down even further. So in traditional financial markets, such as stock markets, it has circuit breakers when the loss becomes too much. In blockchain and DeFi world, there is no such circuit breaker so far. This is, in particular, is important for us to further investigate and explore the different ways to reduce systemic risks. So in the traditional financial services, one phenomenon we have heard about is called bank run, when users are concerned about the solvency of a bank and outruns to the bank to try to take their money out. And in this case, when there's a background in DeFi, oftentimes no money may be returned. However, in DeFi, there can also be a similar phenomenon as bank run. For example, a pool in a DeFi application, a liquidity pool in a DeFi application such as Curve or Aave may get blacklisted. And in this case, users will try to may try to take out their liquidity, and in this case, the earlier exits will have better price for later exits, and the protocol is designed in a way to punish the later exits, and hence causing a bank run phenomenon in DeFi. So in traditional finance, you may have heard of the term bank run, where users are concerned about solvency of a bank and outruns to the bank to demand to take their money out. And oftentimes, in such cases, no money gets returned until things are sorted out. In DeFi, there may be a similar bank run phenomenon. Another important type of risk that we need to consider is DeFi privacy. So in permissionless blockchains, usually users are pseudonymous, not anonymous. For example, the balances of the different accounts, transactions between different accounts, and when the transactions are made, and so on, all these are public information. For example, we can see the super wealthy DeFi accounts on-chain ourselves. So here is an example of an address on the Ethereum blockchain, and we can see that it has over $4 billion. And hence, in DeFi, it's important to develop different techniques to help enhance privacy in DeFi applications as well. There are a number of exciting and important open research challenges. One, scalability. For example, currently, Ethereum has limited scalability, can only perform about 20 transactions per second. And such scalability limitations severely limit the scalability of DeFi applications. As a consequence, today, most of these DeFi applications are very expensive to use, oftentimes can cost tens of dollars or even hundreds of dollars to perform a single transaction on these DeFi applications. And hence, it's also an important open research challenge to see how we can enable the broader population to utilize these DeFi applications, how we can also make it easier for end users to use these DeFi applications. As I already mentioned, privacy is another open research challenge in DeFi, and in particular, how we can enable greater privacy for users and at the same time can also enable regulation compliance. And security is a huge open challenge in DeFi. And as we already discussed, there can be security issues at all layers of the blockchain and DeFi applications. How can we design and build more secure oracles to provide authentic and correct information in a timely fashion on-chain? Protocol and smart contracts can have different vulnerabilities and have been exploited in the past for huge loss to the users. And we need to design and develop new program and protocol analysis and formal verification techniques to ensure the security of these DeFi protocols and smart contracts. How can we design and develop new approaches and techniques for better analyzing composability risks and mitigate systemic risks? We also need to develop more effective incentive designs to ensure that the players in the ecosystem have the right incentive to behave properly. And miner extractable value is a huge phenomenon in the DeFi ecosystem today. How can we design better DeFi applications and services that can reduce these miner extractable value and provide more benefits to users? And the governance is a new domain for exploration and for research. How to design better governance mechanisms to ensure that the DeFi application services is decentralized and at the same time can operate properly and be secure. And DeFi area is very new. It's very different from how traditional finance works. And there are many open questions for legal and compliance. And this is a huge area for open research as well. So overall, in this class, we hope to help shed light in this interdisciplinary domain at the intersection of computer science and finance. And we, for each financial function, we hope to investigate the CeFi and DeFi options. Is either one of these optimal? And we'll evaluate both through the lens of computer science and finance. Is the application computable, programmable? Is the application welfare enhancing and stable? How do the new and old systems interact? We also hope to explore new questions and challenges in regulation and legal frameworks.